Hi guys, coffee roasting in this video. We're going to be roasting coffee in a popcorn popper. It's quite a simple process. It's easy to do and you get your own fresh roasted coffee beans, which is great. So why roast your own coffee? Well, there are a few reasons. One of which is if you don't have a local coffee roaster to buy beans from, then your only option is a supermarket. The beans in the supermarket could be anything from a month or more older than the roast date, which is not a good thing because the best flavour extraction and aroma is gotten from the bean in the first 2 weeks after roasting. So if you're roasting fresh yourself, you know that they're fresh. The other reason is when you buy from the supermarket is you'll likely have a blend in the packet. So what you'll have is a mixture potentially of Arabica and Robusta beans and a mixture of beans from all over the world blended into a particular manufacturer's desired flavour. Now, roasting your own means that you get the opportunity to roast and sample single origin beans, so you get to taste the distinct flavours of each region that the bean comes from and the processing method of extracting the bean from the berry, which is interesting. Another reason is that it's frankly just fun to do. So it's kind of cool being able to make your own coffee and make a cup and know that you've done it yourself. You can tailor the roast to suit yourself. You can give yourself either a pale roast or a dark roast. You can do small enough batches so that you only make enough to consume within a week or two. So you guarantee the freshness. And you really can tell the difference when you're making yourself a coffee. With an espresso, for example, you get a really good thick crema and intense flavours, and when you're making coffee by various other methods, one of my current favourite, the AeroPress, you can see the reaction when you mix it with the water. So just here I'm going to show you the bean. They're actually quite small, as you can see, and they will about double in size when they're roasted. They're very, very hard, they're green, and although most things that you will read will say that they are odourless and tasteless, as for tasteless I don't know, I'm not going to eat a raw bean to tell you, but they're certainly not odourless, but they don't have a very strong odour. They smell kind of like somewhere between freshly mown grass and wheat. It's quite a pleasant smell, and you definitely get that sort of smell in the initial stages of roasting. What you don't get, quite oddly, is an intense coffee aroma at the end of the roast, which surprised me when I did my first roast. That intense aroma comes after the bean has rested and started to degas a little bit. So we're just going to pop over to the roasting equipment, run through that, and then we'll start the roast. So down here we have a popcorn popper, 1200 watt bog basic popcorn popper without the lid. Here I have a paper cone which is just sort of quickly assembled because I noticed while I was roasting previously, as the beans roasted, they got lighter, they got a bit more active, and some of them, and I was losing a few beans, they were spitting out of the sides. This allows the warm air to still rise up, and the odd bean that does spit out bounces back in. Simple but effective. Here we have the beans, 50 grams, which is about 1/4 of a cup. With a slightly larger popcorn popper or a slightly wider one, you could get more in. Hopefully I'll be able to get a slightly larger one at some point. I'm assuming they make them a bit bigger because some of the other videos I've seen mention using 1/2 to 3/4 of a cup in one. There's a sieve. Stainless steel is ideal because it draws the heat away, so as soon as the beans finish roasting, you drop it straight into this, swirl it around, and then I sort of shuffle it between this and another sieve to try and extract most of the heat and stop the roasting process, because they will continue to cook for a little while afterwards. And then here I have a wooden spoon, and I use the handle for hand agitating the beans if I stop it to check the colour, but I still want to keep the beans moving without cooking them any further and stop them sitting in one place and burning. So what I'm going to do now is we'll start the roast process. This is stone cold. We'll start the roast process. I found that with this it's kind of easier to go by sight and by sound rather than timing, because much depends on the ambient temperature and what have you. So what I'm going to do is pour the beans into there, I'm just quickly going to switch that on and show you how they'll look moving around. There are no moving parts inside the popcorn popper if you're not familiar with these. There are just vents on the side and a fan and a heating element underneath, and that circulates air around because of the shape of the slots. So I'll just quickly switch it on so you can see what that looks like moving around. So obviously that's canted at a little angle, but you get the idea that that keeps the beans moving, because the important thing is that the beans are kept moving. So I'm going to zoom in. There we go, and hopefully you'll be able to see a reasonable amount of this. It's going to get noisy now, so I'll stop speaking and we'll just kind of go with the video from here. I'm also doing this in the conservatory because you'll notice when it starts going that there's quite a bit of chaff comes off. It's not particularly messy, it hoovers up incredibly easily, but it's easier to do it somewhere where it's easier to clean up, and it does generate a bit of smoke as well. Already as the bean warms up there, you're starting to get that sort of wheat smell. And you'll see we've got small amounts of chaff coming off the bean already. Once the beans get more active, I'll place the cone on to keep everything in place and stop the beans escaping. Hoping that you can hear that above the buzzing of the motor. That's the first crack just starting there. The beans are starting to jump about a bit more, as you can see. So now I'm just going to use this cone, which unfortunately will obstruct your view a bit. At this point right there, I'm going to stop the motor and hand agitate. You'll notice there's a bit of smoke coming off there, because that's sitting there a bit more, it's not being blown out as noticeably. You might still be able to hear the odd pop of the first crack finishing there. And this one isn't going to take much more roasting at all, because we're going for a very light roast. Essentially with a light roast you get more acidity, more caffeine, but more of the flavour of the bean, of the origin. With a darker roast you get less caffeine and less acidity, but you get more of the flavour of the roast and less of the bean's origin. So this is one of the great things about roasting your own beans. You can experiment with particular different types of beans, and you can try different roasts and see what your preference is for them. Now this whole process has probably taken maybe 4 minutes, 5 minutes so far, something like that. Typically it will take about 8 or 9 for a medium to dark roast. I typically go for a sort of between 3 and 4 kind of roast level. This one I'm probably just going to give one quick last little zap around, and then I will be taking it out to cool and I'll be calling it done. So one quick little blast more. Once again, switch it off and agitate it. The main thing to remember is you're either needing to tip the beans as soon as you stop, or keep them moving, because if you leave them in one place they will burn. I'm going to call that one done at that. Reach over and get my sieve ready here, and then just tip them straight out. And there you are. That's actually probably a little bit darker than I intended. I should have maybe stopped that at the first point. So that's a little bit darker than I intended the roast to be. But still, that's sort of somewhere between a 2 and a 3, I think, which is quite nice. I typically don't like a very, very pale roast. You'll notice the odd one, like that would probably be a roast level 1, very, very straw-coloured pale. That would be about a 2, and then this sort of lovely chocolate colour is about a roast level 3, which is typically as pale as I will go. So this is overall somewhere between a sort of 2 and a 3. What I'm going to do now is leave that to cool down, because this whole thing does get quite warm, and we'll leave that to cool down for a good sort of 20 minutes or more. And then I'm going to go and do another roast, but a darker one, and come back to you with that. So we're back in a moment. I'm losing the light a little bit, so I'm just going to get a torch on this. But having let the beans cool down, this is the second roast where I've gone to a dark roast, basically a level 5, or as near as, it's kind of tricky to tell with this light, to be honest, as near as I can without risking the beans oiling up, without risking all the oils coming to the surface and ruining the roast. And this is about as dark as I sort of dare go at the moment with the process I've been trying. I suppose you could say this is a sort of an excessive 4 heading up to a 5, but I would class this personally as a 5. And what I will do is I will just get the other beans to show you a comparison. This is a little bit tricky because I'm kind of losing the light at this stage, so this is a bit more awkward than I expected. But there we have the sort of dark roast, and it's not going to work this at all. There we have the light roast. This is a sort of a 2-ish, pale brown with some chocolate browns in there, and then we have a dark roast with what we've got there really is sort of dark chocolate heading over the edge there. So that just gives you a bit of an example of the variety that you can achieve between with the same bean and just different roastings. The process for this batch here was exactly the same, just a little bit longer with a couple more stops and agitation. And what I was looking for was getting to the point where just before the surface of the bean becomes oily and shiny, and trying to stop it before it does that. And as I say, I could have probably gone a little bit further, but I didn't want to push it and risk it. So we've got nice chocolate brown there, and we've got sort of dark chocolate and a bit darker in there. So there you have it, roasting coffee beans. It's straightforward enough. You have to be very attentive and be prepared to clean up some chaff afterwards, but it's very rewarding. In a day's time, or a day or two's time after you've let it rest and the aroma starts to flow out of that, you will have, if you've never bought fresh roasted coffee before, you will have the best tasting cup of coffee you've ever had. So give it a go. Well, thanks for watching. I hope this has been informative and useful for any of you that are thinking about having a go at your own roasting. Popcorn poppers are very cheap and plentiful. You can find them in second-hand shops, that kind of thing, because they're the sort of thing people buy, use for a little bit, then the novelty wears off and they get rid. So they're a great way to start roasting your own coffee. There are other methods, various methods on if you look around YouTube. I think this is the easiest, giving the most consistent results. One thing I will say is I'm not a coffee expert, and there are people out there that will say, you know, that some popcorn roasters roast the beans too quickly, some of them too slowly. I think provided you get one that's at least about 1000 or 1100 watts, you should be okay. Anything less than that maybe take too long, and then what you're risking there is sort of burning out the equipment. And the experts that say, you know, the roast times aren't perfect might be right, but the one thing I can guarantee you is that even if you do a 5-minute roast for a dark roast in one of these machines and it roasts as quickly as that, regardless of whether it's the perfect roast time for that bean or not, it will taste 100 times better than anything you buy out of a supermarket, guaranteed. So it's definitely worth a go. Thank you for watching.